Hi, hello, hey, and welcome to my tent, a place to hear life experiences, different opinions, a range of journeys, and a viewpoint different than our own. A place to challenge our own thoughts, a space to learn a little bit, and I promise some fun along the way. I believe we're better when we let a range of people into our tents, so welcome to mine. Did you know that our health is encompassed by way more than just food and fitness? Did you know I'm a health coach? What is a health coach? I can tell you. I work with individuals and groups to look at all aspects of life that help make us truly well. I have structured programs to help you create realistic, challenging but achievable, and long-term transformations that span long past our time working together. I help you take a multifaceted approach to your health, ranging from food, fitness, relationships, work-life balance, financial health, gratitude and joy, creativity, career, and more. If you are looking to make a health transformation, visit my website in the show notes or email me, sarah@sarahjohnstonwellness.com. Cheers to good health. Hello, hello.
Hi.
Ashley B. Jones. You have a name that I have to say the full name. Ashley B. Jones. It's like, I can't not. So
It's like Junie B. Jones. It
Yes.
has a ring to it.
It does. And I like that you have the V, but we do. We have Ashley B. Jones here today. And she's an intuitive transformation coach and healer, which I'm super excited to talk about because I think you have one of the coolest intersectionalities I've seen in this space. And I've just in reading your bio and learning about all that you do, it's just you've taken a really cool path to this. I'm really amped. I'm amped to talk. So welcome into the tent.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here in your tent.
Yes. And once you're in. So you can't get rid of me, which is the most fun part. But there's a lot of different things that we can definitely dive into within this episode. But I want to start with how you got into the space and the path that you're in, because hopefully you'll give us all the juicy goods on this, but you approach the neuroscience side and the spiritual side, which I tend to see people in this space going like either full like clinical or full spiritual, but you have a really cool background in both. So can you tell us how you got started and interested in this world and how that has kind of shaped your view on how you work with people today?
Yeah, of course. Growing up, I was always very interested in all things like boho and spiritual. And I remember my mom is a nurse and we grew up, and I'm actually home right now in the Silicon Valley. So I grew up around tech. I grew up around a lot of science. And I remember I played soccer growing up and I got a concussion, and she had become friends with this group of women through this very crunchy granola group that she became a part of. My sister was a part of this like outdoor preschool that was very fun. And all these women were very into the spirituality and saw this psychic and saw different healers in the Bay Area. And she took me to a healer when I had a concussion playing soccer. And I will never forget, I went in and the woman did meridian work.
What's that?
And my understanding is she's like muscle testing. So she would talk on the different like Chinese meridians of your body and basically look at where the energy is in balance and then ask your body questions. Your body would respond either by resisting or by giving. So it would say yes or no, which was like, 14-year-old me is like, this is so cool. Like, I want to know more. Like, this is my bread and butter. And I had a concussion, and I remember her being like, oh, one of the pieces of your skull is out of place, and her putting it back into place. And I literally remember leaving being like, my headache is gone. The headache I had going in is gone. And I think that was really the intro for me into it. And, but then I'm in school and I loved psychology. And I decided when I went to college that I wanted to study neuroscience. I grew up also with two siblings with a pretty intense brain malformality they were born with. Their brains develop differently and they have seizures and cognitive and developmental delays. I'm actually part of the reason I'm home in California right now is they had brain surgery 2 weeks ago, which was pretty intense. And I'm home taking care of them for the weekend. And I was really, really fascinated in understanding like why we are the way we are. Like I wanted to like dig into it and like peel it all apart. And when I went to school, I was like, I want to learn more about the brain. I want to understand our behavior. And while I was in school, I had a couple like very deep dark nights of the soul. And if you're not familiar with what a dark night of the soul is, basically like your whole world cracks apart and dissolves, and you're kind of left on the floor with um, what feels like nothing. And at that same point, which some people also call rock bottom, there also is this really beautiful beginning point. And right before I had a pretty dark moment in my life, I had received the first psychic reading I'd ever have, where I'd felt the most seen and the most heard and the most understood that I'd ever felt. And then this thing happened, and I felt like I was cast out and I was ostracized from a community I was part of. Um, Very much like a witch trial smear campaign kind of
Oof.
energy.
Yeah.
And which was really, really intense. And something that I'm actually very passionate about is understanding that community and feeling safe in your community is one of the most important things when it comes to feeling safe in your body and safe in your nervous system. So I'm like deep in like the neuro understanding genetics, understanding how we are the way we are from a body standpoint, had this incredibly spiritual experience, had this really traumatic experience happen in my personal life. And then as I started to go through and heal, I just got more and more and more into tarot, I was introduced to card readings. I just felt like, I'd taken a bite of something that I was like, I need to eat more of this. I need to consume more of this. And when I graduated from school, I was like, I don't really know what I want to do with my life. Was trained in Reiki, and then life kind of tumbled down. And now I'm here where I am now, where I blend, as Sarah so eloquently said, the spiritual with the science, and really creating this intersection of understanding how spirituality actually shows up from a scientific standpoint and from a brain
Yeah.
standpoint, because that's how I make sense of it. And that's how my science brain like looks at it and is like, well, okay, cool. This is beautiful. And this has been around for thousands and thousands of years. And humans are smart enough to not do things that aren't going to support our survival. And how does that make sense within our worldview of science these days? So
Yeah.
that's a very long-winded
I love
explanation
it.
to who I am, what I do.
I love it because it makes so much sense, because the brain is an extremely complex
Mm,
thing. And I think also what came to mind when I was like also digging into you via your site and all of that jazz is like, yeah, a lot of these things have been around for eons of years, like spirituality wise, but our brains have also
mhm.
developed way more than the cavemen. I mean,
Oh
like
yeah.
what we're exposed to and what we ingest and what we experience today is just a very different side of things. And so there's something to also be said about individuality as well, because
Mhm,
we're the only ones that live in our brains. We can
mhm.
experience things in a similar way, but like my brain's going to be very different than yours, than my
Yes.
husband's, and X, Y, and Z. Did you ever have thoughts when you were going to school, like, oh, you would maybe want to go the doctor route? Or did you pretty early on decide that wasn't it?
No, I did. I was seriously thinking about it. And to be quite honest with you, I didn't want to take physics. And I remember there was a moment sophomore year of school where I was like, do I want to take organic chemistry where I'm going to cry, or do I want to take poetry? And I decided to take poetry instead. And it's one of those moments where I think I was evaluating and making a choice at this moment, where I was like, do I want to commit 6 years of my life, hundreds of thousands of dollars to become a degree? I have to really want that. And I wasn't sure that I was that committed to
Yeah.
going the science route in that standpoint. Now, I do think that, fully candidly, I might go back to school eventually, because I think that there's some really, really interesting research being done around the effect of and the impact of spirituality on the brain, and how it actually is creating resilience to depression for people,
Mm.
which is wild to me, that it creates a thickening of the part of the brain that actually atrophies with
Whoa.
severe depression. Yeah. And there's so much really interesting research happening. I think when I'm doing, sessions with clients too, and I'm literally watching people transform in front of my eyes and feeling more confident in their nervous system healing, like my instinct is like, I want to go hook you up to a machine now and look at your brain and understand what your brain is doing. Like I want to like understand, and that's so much of who I am.
Yeah.
But to your point around the individuality, um, there's a really great book by the Dalai Lama called The Universe in a Single Atom. And one of the critiques he has of modern science, which I think is really fascinating, is that they're missing a whole point. And so much of science comes from this like objective state of you're trying to control for so many variables and so many things in our environment so you can really understand what is happening. But we miss the individual experience. We don't take into account someone's lived, unique, personal, like internal experience. And I think that's to me what I find really, really interesting about the spiritual space is it is such a personal thing. Like you really have to experience it to believe it. You really have to see it to believe it. It's not something of like, just trust me. It
Yeah.
really is. And that's what I believe. Like, no, let's like, I want you to see it. I want you to believe yourself because that's more important than you believing anyone else in this world.
Right. Yeah. And it's the same. The way that I also view life is like everything that's going to be shaped by our experience. And
Mhm.
someone may not be able to relate to if they haven't experienced that exact same thing. And that's just the way that life is. But the more that we have these conversations is really important because it also drives the point home that like everyone's going to have a different reaction. But what you're also saying when you were talking about that research, the brain's a muscle. I mean,
Mhm.
and what therapy is essentially getting that to rewire and repath the way that we're thinking about things. But what I sometimes find is that only is then focusing on the brain, but what
Mhm.
happens to the rest of ourself? Like what happens to the rest of our body and soul
Mhm.
and how we're showing up in that aspect. So when you're combining these two things and working with your clients, how are you sort of balancing these two worlds or mixing these two things together? Because I know that you basically create individualized programs, which is kind of the whole point of what we're talking about as well.
Yeah.
How are you mixing these two things together? So, and maybe you can tell me, do some
Mhm.
people need to lean more into the science versus the spiritual? Is it kind of just something that you decide together? Like, what does that look like?
You know, I mean, I weave them together. Honestly, we start always with the nervous system. We start always with the body. Um, if I can, I'm going to give a little overview if you don't know what the nervous system is and
Yes.
how it works.
Oh
So
my gosh. School us.
I'm going to go into it. So we have, when we're thinking about how we react to our environment, we have our brain, which is part of our central nervous system. And then we have the peripheral nervous system, which is like movement. It's everything that extends out from the spine, all of the nerves. Our body functions and operates based on the autonomic nervous system, which is like everything that happens automatically. And then the somatic nervous system. So, like, you can't see me, but I'm gesturing right now and I'm choosing to move my hands. I am choosing to speak. And one of the most interesting things I think when it comes to, I'm not a breathwork facilitator, but breath actually flips in between something we do automatically and something that we can choose consciously to do. So you can think
Mhm.
of the autonomic nervous system as the unconscious nervous system, and then the somatic nervous system as the conscious nervous system. And when we have an experience in our life, it feels threatening by any means, our autonomic nervous system turns on and says, okay, we need to be safe. We need to protect ourselves. And that specific part of the autonomic nervous system is called the sympathetic nervous system. So you might have heard it as fight or flight, or it's like the, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Like it's our reaction to protecting ourselves. And then the rest, digest, ease, business as usual nervous system is called the parasympathetic. And a lot of the work that I do with my clients is working with, any type of trauma, which is either it's a big T trauma or it's little T trauma of experiences that have made us feel unsafe, that actually hijack our brain, turn off our higher levels of executive functioning. So we're not actually able to think our way out of how we're feeling because our, what's it called? The prefrontal cortex shuts off. Our limbic system turns on, which is like the amygdala. It's the feeling, it's the instincts, it's the drives of the body. And then there's really no thinking our way out of, feeling safe. It's like you can tell yourself you feel safe as much as you want, but if your
Mhm.
body doesn't feel safe, you literally will be responding from that place of I don't feel safe. So a lot of
Scientifically, right. Yeah.
literally,
Biologically,
yeah,
biology. Gosh, why can't I speak?
biologically,
Yeah. There we go.
scientifically, the neuroscience, all of the brain stuff. And it's just crazy to me because so much, I love therapy and I have been in it for years. And I think there is a piece of the modern way we treat mental health and the way we treat, certain circumstances in our lives where if we're not focusing on creating safety and a sense of love and unconditional regard within the being, our body's not going to actually be rewiring any of these pathways of how we think because we don't feel safe. And
Mhm.
so with clients, I typically, based on what they're coming to me with, where they're at in their life, and really, why I love being a coach is we're moving present forward. We're like, where are you now? What has impacted the where you feel now? And what do you want to alchemize or what do you want to shift? What do you want to transform to become this version of you that you want to be?
Mhm.
Because so much of also with the brain is like, we only know what we know. And if we're operating from like, this is what I've always known, we're going to keep playing out the same patterns versus if I can literally go meet my future self or meet my highest version of myself, the version that I want to be, the energy that I want to accompany, the life, and then literally feel it in our body and feel it in our senses, we're actually able to shift the way we relate to the world because we've given our brain, we've given our body, and we've given our nervous system new information to work with.
Yeah, I just was reading it. It's fiction. It's not nonfiction by any means, but it was, you repeat what you don't heal.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, whoa. So I'm reading this like murder novel.
And you're like, let me highlight that and paste it on my mood board.
I was like, that's a really good way to put it, because your brain also is what creates thoughts, but is also something that you can utilize to heal the rest of yourself and the rest of your body. And you talk about it being, is it one day at a time, right? One step at a time, one day at a time, one step at a time. There,
one step at a time.
Wrote it down. So a lot of this is probably going to take work and a lot of repetition and recognition of, I am feeling X, Y, and Z. And because of these feelings, I need to take these steps. So especially when someone's coming to you and they need to essentially rethink the way that they do things, how are you approaching that from like the now and the steps that we take now, and then looking out into the state, like you mentioned, they want to get to, because we're a culture and society that wants instant gratification, which I wish was a thing. So how
It'd
are
be
you?
Nice, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, wouldn't it just be like, I'm healed, super.
Click the button, it arrives. It's like the Amazon, right? You're like, one day delivery.
Yes, like mental stability, one day delivery. Check, sign me up. But a lot of these things probably take time, because you're literally strengthening, enhancing, whatever, a muscle, like anything else in your body. I'm a fitness coach. You're not going to get biceps overnight. So how are you thinking of this in small steps, and then combining that together to the end goal that someone wants to get to, where they're saying, here's the now, here's the trigger for the now, and then here's the state that I want to get to?
I think it, again, goes back to that personalized piece of like, what feels doable with my life. I think sometimes we can have these huge goals. And to be clear, I am also one of these people who has these huge goals and big dreams, and it can feel almost debilitating to look at that and be like, I have no idea how I'm going to get there. And I've also found that when we have those big goals, sometimes we get 25, 50% the way there, and then the dream changes. And so if we're only fixated on the end goal or only fixated on the dream, we're actually creating this this barrier for ourselves to be actually able to get there. And so part of the reason why I really, believe and embody and teach this concept of one day at a time is because, or one step at a time, is that just take the next right step that feels good to you. Like, I think sometimes there's this feeling that like there is this universal right or wrong, or there's a right way to get to the dream. And there's, this person had their 10-step plan, so I should do their 10-step plan to get the, get the job or get the partner. And so much of when it comes to creating or to manifesting or to engaging and making the life that we want, both internally and externally, it comes from realizing like, what can I do today? What can I do? Can I meditate for 20 minutes? Can I meditate for 5 minutes? Like, what actually feels doable to me? Because it also, if we are doing something that feels so out of bounds of what our current life allows for, we then don't do it. And then there's a sense of failure. And then there's a sense of like, oh, now I haven't done it. And when we are rewiring these neural pathways in our brain, we have to be creating that reward system, or we work really well with reward. Like, humans work so much better with reward than punishment. Like, I'm like, tell me I'm a good person. Like, tell me I did a good job. Give me a star. Give me a little treat. I know for myself, I'll go to Trader Joe's and I'll always buy myself this little aloe water and flowers, because that's my reward for going and doing the thing that I don't necessarily want to do. And so it's finding, okay, like, what's something specific that I can get done, that I know I can achieve, that feels measured, right? That feels also attainable in my life, that feels like I can actually like do this, given, if I work with clients who have kids and like are running around, people have full-time jobs, and like maybe sitting down and meditating for 30 minutes is not doable in my life. And so asking, myself to do it, or setting that goal for myself, because that's what the dream life is. Like, is that actually realistic? Is that actually something that I can create for myself? And so I think thinking about it as one step at a time creates this sense of, how can I actually bring and merge my life today with the life that I dream of. So I can actually create it in a realistic way rather than this fantasy that becomes a thing that I dream or think about without actually being able to make it happen. And then there's
Right.
that sense of envy. And then you're looking the FOMO, right? Or it's the Instagram accounts that have like the 2 hour morning routine that's like so perfect. And I'm like, I will never, to be very clear with you all, I will never be that person. Like I will maybe do a couple things every morning, but like, I'm not, you know what I mean? And so that works for
Yeah.
some people, but it's like, what works for you? I
Yeah.
think it's the idea of one step at a time. Like what works for you today?
Yeah. And it's the instant gratification thing. And I go back and forth with this Instagram and TikTok and whatnot in particular, because it's so good and great to be able to share and to have this platform to access many like we haven't had in the past. But it also creates that level of comparison. And like you were saying, like the one step that I can take is not going to be the same as yours because we have different lives and circumstances. And I feel like a lot of people want do these 10 things, get this outcome, but it's not going to be the same for every single person, nor is what success looks like for every single person. Like we're not all going to value those exact same things. And so I really like that approach because it can be really easy to go on Instagram and be like, well, this person seems to have it all together. Why can't I just replicate what this person's doing? If I do this 2 hour morning routine, I have like 2 minutes in the morning, maybe.
Mhm.
Maybe if I'm lucky, I get like 2 minutes before my kid's like, "Wah!" Um, and people I feel like want to say, well, if I just replicate what she does,
Mhm.
I should be able to get the same results, right? Well, no. And I like that you're backing that up also with the scientific piece of it, where it's like literally no, like
Mhm.
because of all these different factors. So is there resistance that you see sometimes to people almost not wanting to create their own individualized programs? I see it in fitness.
Yeah, I think that sometimes, when I work with people and especially with the spiritual space and I work with these
Mm,
different parts of self and we're going to do shadow work and we're going to do spirit guides and it's very much something that I feel like has become a little flashy and is
mhm,
like hot buttony, similar to like angel numbers, like it's become a little like a marketing thing. And a lot of times when our first session, like we're going to spend the whole hour and a half regulating your nervous system. And
mm,
your job for the next 2 weeks or 1 week is to be finding how to regulate your nervous system. It's not necessarily that big, dopamine, instant gratification, big, so large that it feels out of this world kind of experience. It's very much like we have to start with the ground and we have to start with you feeling safe in this work and feeling safe in your body and feeling safe in your life. Because, and I will say this, I do not think we can manifest anything in a way that's
mhm.
going to stay if we don't feel safe when it comes to our relationship with it.
So for that, do you believe like in manifestation? I have an interesting relationship with it because I feel like some people think of manifestation as just like, if I just think about it really hard, it'll happen. It's like, again, I wish like the Amazon Prime, like
Mm,
1 day delivery, but it's like, what's the balance between really, manifesting it into your life, but also putting in the work? Because you're
mhm.
encouraging people to put in the work. Like this is what a lot of what you're doing is like you're gonna have to work for it a little. So like that's such a hot button word too, is like, oh, I'll just manifest it. Like, okay, but what's what's the work
And then
piece and the manifest piece?
100%. And again, I think that the something that isn't necessarily talked about is it's such a personal experience. So for each person, what you need to do to manifest what you want is going to look different. And I'll give personal examples like with work, it's very easy for me to manifest with it. It's very much a masculine energy for me. So like asking for what I want and then taking action after it. You have to like, write down, be very specific, make sure it feels aligned for you and it feels good and it feels grounded. And then taking, aligned action to bring it in. And sometimes once you start taking aligned action, it will just start to show up for you. I do remember when I moved to Denver, which is where I live full time, and got there and I'd been waiting for a really long time and I'd wanted this perfect apartment. I did all this visualization and I got there and I knew the apartment wasn't like exactly right, but I was getting there. And my lucky number is 7. And I pulled up and my parking space number is 77. And they put me on the 7th floor and it was in this beautiful building. And my mom was helping me move in. And we went to Home Goods and we found this side table. We're like, this is beautiful, but they only have one. What are the odds the next Home Goods will have one? And I went to the next Home Goods and they had it. And I was like, I was so overwhelmed by the amount of good and the amount that it was just like working out that I literally had a panic attack and had to walk out of the store and take a moment because
Yeah.
I was like, this feeling of goodness, this feeling of alignment doesn't feel safe or familiar in my body.
Yeah. I was going to ask that question where it's like, you would think, or someone like maybe from the outside looking in would be like, that should give her such security and this sense of peace and safety. But that's also not always the case. Like that sometimes is overwhelming to you. So when you were going through that, knowing, okay, I have to come to a point where I feel safe within my body, all of these things are happening. What were some of the things that you were doing to try to get, I'm going to get the nervous system part wrong. Which nervous system do we want to go down there?
The parasympathetic. You're going to activate the parasympathetic. It's like
How do
rest and
we,
digest. Is
yes.
the fun part. Yeah.
So how are you taking in all of this and being like, whoa, a lot of these things are happening and finding a place of safety? Like, where is that? What was that process?
So I'll tell you this, like in that moment, I literally just walked out of the Home Goods and like took a moment and just like sat with my head in my hands and was like, I just need to breathe right now. It's been really beautiful so that was back in 2021 of the last 2 years coming into greater alignment and feeling more and more safe. And that is what my work within myself is every day. I do a grounding meditation for myself. I sit with this connection to my own energy, but the practices that I really recommend are the 4-7-8 breath patterns. You inhale for 4, you hold your breath for 7, and you exhale for a count of 8, and you repeat it at least 4 times. I do that every day, all the time. If I start to get overwhelmed, if I start to get uncomfortable, like I really take intentional time to sit and feel grounded. Journaling is a really great way to ground myself. I'm really co-regulating is a really big thing for me too. So being in the companionship of other
Mhm.
people who I feel really safe with and feel really seen by also brings me back down. It makes me feel very comfortable. And I have a couple other ones that I think when we get really, really elevated can help, which are like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 senses practice. So you look at 5 things you can see in a room, 4 things that you can uh, touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. Doing like gentle somatic movement where you sway side to side or you shake your body out. I am also, if you meet me and you start to pay attention to it, I always am like shaking things off of me or I'm shaking out my body because it brings me back in physically into feeling safe and connected. But the more that I've done around feeling safe in my body and continuing to work and continuing to cultivate the sense of ease and peace, even in very basic moments, which is also why I really talk about like one step at a time, is
Mhm.
that doing this work in low stakes environments prepares you to do it in a high stakes environment. Trying to figure out how to regulate your nervous system and what your relationship specifically and what your secret sauce is for yourself when you are in a very high stress environment is not the moment because your body's like, I'm literally being threatened right now. I'm literally
Mhm.
do not feel safe. So I don't even know how to bring it back down. I have to find these little pockets to build, a bigger sense of relationship. So then when it gets really high stress or it gets these big moments, it's like, oh, I know how to deal with, you know, I lose my job or I have to move
Mhm.
cities or something really huge happened in my family or I'm in just a family situation period, which can be really triggering. It's like, I know how to use these tools now. So finding these like pockets of times where I can build these tools is really helpful. But to go back to what you were saying around like, how do you, cultivate that? I think that it's really reminding yourself that like, it's okay to feel good.
Mm.
And if something's working out for me, it does not mean that the next thing that's going to happen is something bad. And I
Yeah.
think it's often very much the thought of like, wow, I just won the lottery. Am I going to get hit by a car?
Yeah.
And you're like, your brain goes to the automatic, like, and that's really common with like anyone who's had any type of traumatic experience is like
Yeah.
something went really well. I do not trust that this good thing is going to stay. So I am going to look for wherever the next bad thing is going to be versus just sitting with like things are good and I can trust that things are good. I
Right.
can trust that I'm safe and prepared for if something ever happens, but I don't have to anticipate it.
Yeah. It's like the anticipatory. I found this a lot when my dad was sick. I like would have this anticipatory grief of him dying,
Mhm.
but he was a lot. It was the weirdest. I'm like, okay, Sarah, be here. be here, be in this moment. And I really like what you said about doing it in low stakes moments. So things that maybe, um, you know, raise your BP slightly, but start there and starting to kind of figure out and cultivate it. So when something does, you're in a brand new city, you're moving, you're like, this is a big, high stakes moment. And then being able to address and figure out this is what's causing me X, Y, and Z feelings. Here are the things that I can do to bring it back down. Do you find also either whether it be personally or with clients, finding it like, okay, I've done all these tools and tricks, I'm still feeling it. Like, when do you then, like, this still feels unsafe? Like, how do you get to a point where you can say, this still feels unsafe and I need to do something about it? Like, can we talk ourselves out of almost anything essentially? Like,
I don't think we should. Like,
yeah.
for personal example, last Tuesday, 2 Tuesdays ago, my sisters had brain surgery and my
Mm-hmm.
brain was having a full meltdown about this. They're like, they could die. They're literally having deep brain, like the part of their brain that's like not like speech, it's like breathing and heart.
Yeah.
Like if something goes wrong, something really goes wrong. And I was going like fully into like my sisters are going to die. Like I was preparing myself to the point in which I couldn't regulate myself. And I took a cold shower and I put a weighted blanket on and I put soft music on and I was doing the breathing patterns. And then I was like, I just need to actually be afraid right now.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I trying to tell my body to not feel what it instinctually is feeling? Me trying not to feel it actually is triggering me more. I need to call a friend and just cry on the phone, or I need to scream into a pillow. I actually just need to let the feeling be felt versus
Yeah.
trying to avoid the feeling in the moment where there was a very real reason why for me to be afraid. You know,
Yeah.
when I'm driving down the street and I'm like, ooh, what if a car crashes into me? Like that moment is not like obviously logical. And so that's the moment where I'm like, that's not logical. Let's do some nervous system work. Let's bring you back down. You're safe. You're good. Versus the moment when you're actually not safe. We should not gaslight ourselves into
Yeah.
thinking that we're safe. Like that's the moment where we're like, okay, what is my body saying to me? What are my emotions? I like to think of our emotions as our body's language for us and our intuition as our soul's language or our self's language, kind of two different things. So our intuition
Yeah.
is different than our emotions. But when we're having a feeling come up, our body is trying to tell us something.
Yep.
It's trying to communicate something. It doesn't feel safe for some reason. How can we listen? And sometimes when we listen, it actually means like, this actually isn't good for me. And that was huge for me
Yeah.
when I was living in New York City after college. I was at a job that I hated. I joked that I had an energetic allergy to the space where I'd walk in and have a panic attack because the fluorescent lights and the noise. And it just like my body and my energy was like, I hate this. And I
Yep.
kept trying to figure out how to make it work and how to make it work and how to show up. And there got to a point where I was like, Ashley, this isn't for you. And you're trying to make something that's not for you be for you. This is a moment. And it was, really intense for me. Or like I had to choose to walk away
Yeah.
without knowing what I was going to do next. And that was my personal path and my personal choice that I needed to do. But I couldn't keep trying to stick myself into, it's like if you asked a fish to climb a tree and you're comparing it to a monkey, I'm going to butcher this metaphor, but like if you live in a world of trees and monkeys and you're a fish, and then the whole, definition of success is whether or not you can climb a tree, the fish is always going to be seen as like a failure
Yep.
rather than
Yeah.
saying, hey, fish, maybe you should go get in the water and swim.
Find
Like,
your spot, find your spot. I mean, but I think so much of it and the work that you're doing with people as well is to be able to make those decisions. Like that's also really important because you have to learn a way to trust yourself of
mhm,
like, okay, here are the times that I actually really, really know deeply in my soul that this isn't right. When I've
mhm,
tried all these things and I have been doing all this work and I am trying my best to see if I can regulate and I still can't, like that piece is maybe something to evaluate and listen to.
mhm,
So you also are talking about the balance between intuition and
mhm.
energy. What was it? Intuition
Emotions.
and emotions. Okay.
Yeah.
So to go into that a little bit, like how do you view both and how do they play in tandem? And like, do you find sometimes that like intuition overrides or emotion overrides? Like what's kind of the sweet sauce when you're looking at both of those things? Because I think that they're both important, but
Mm,
it can be potentially easy, I think, for one to take the driver's seat when the other one should actually be up there.
100%. And someone somewhere said, and I'm not sure who said it first, but that intuition whispers and anxiety screams.
Alexa said that in her episode.
It's all over. And it's interesting because you hear that and like the screaming is so loud, right? When you have a fear response, it is really hard to sit and be like, what do I intuitively feel? What do I know? There's a moment in which we literally just have to feel like if we're really, really angry at someone, that might not be that there is intuitively or you're picking up on something coming up. Oftentimes we have to create spaces of quiet to be able to hear ourself and our soul and what that's actually trying to communicate with us. What, if you look at this from a more spiritual perspective, what the universe, what spirit is actually trying to say to you, what you are interpreting. And that's really where intuition comes in of like, I have this feeling, this really, strong, but like calm knowing.
Yeah.
It's that gut feeling. It's in your bones. You're like, I just know this. And there's not necessarily like an agenda with it. Oftentimes the ego can come in and be like, we're talking about ego work. It's very much like, I want something to happen.
Yeah.
I want this to be like, I have a desire, I have a reason, I have like an agenda versus the intuition, which is like, you just need to do this.
Yeah.
And it's a very still moment. And I think when we think about the relationship between intuition of like, I have this emotional, like, I wouldn't say actually it's emotional. I would say it's like somatic. It's like an embodied knowing of like, it just is like this full body feeling. And oftentimes for different people, it will sit in different places in their body, whether it's their gut, whether it's their heart, whether it's their throat, whether it's like the palm of their hands or whether it's their feet versus the emotional response, which is like our body trying to communicate something. And the body is really going to be more communicating our relationship to our environment. And that's like both like how we feel internally and how we feel within the people we're in relationship with and how we feel in like the physical environment that we're in. And so they're both like languages that I really love to talk with clients about like learning the language of the body. And like, when I get angry, what is my body trying to say? Do I not like this? Am I angry about my boundaries being violated? Is it actually angry because the thing I want didn't happen? When I'm, experiencing sadness, what is the grief that's coming up? What is the feeling that's coming up? Why is it coming up? Versus, when something else comes up, when it's an intuitive knowing, typically that's around like what I should do, like a decision I should make.
Yeah.
And something that's like a knowing around like that I'm not necessarily picking up on and like with my literal senses of like, I see this thing, but I have a feeling about this. That's not like an emotional feeling, if that makes sense.
It is. I mean, I get that way with people. Like some people just feel good in my bones, like in my absolute depths of my soul. And sometimes I don't even know why. I mean, it's not like they're doing anything. They're not like, doing backflips and tricks. It's just like some people give me that feeling and some people really don't. And those people, I'm like, I don't know why. Something isn't feeling right. And it's a very different feeling for me than when I am sad or angry or like reacting outwardly. Because a lot of times my intuition, I don't outwardly react to. Like I don't do much outwardly. Obviously, when I'm sad, I cry. When I'm angry, don't ask my husband that question. But like intuitively, I almost am very still. It's like the opposite of actually a physical.
You
like
said that and something came to me. I think that intuition is a feeling of safety. So it's very quiet, right? When we feel really safe, we're able to be really, really still and just ourself and at ease. And so much about learning about how to listen to your intuition comes from cultivating a sense of safety within the body so that you can actually hear what's going on underneath the emotional layer.
And not let the anxiety scream. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or the emotions, it's like, I feel really happy. So I want this person, but it's like, can we hold, and it can go both ways between like the shadow and the light emotions of like, I'm really, really excited about this person. If you meet someone, it's like, can I take a moment, sit with myself? Does this actually feel good? Or is this a familiar pattern? Or is this just a dopamine hit? And it could be both, or it could be that like one emotional feeling is actually masking or creating this layer over almost of like what you're actually feeling underneath or you're actually able to evaluate. And sometimes, and it really ranges per person, but I know for me, I have to sit with things for a couple of days and sometimes longer to figure out what I'm actually feeling. I have to let my emotions, emotion. I have to let them, I have to ride that
emote,
emote, do their thing, and then be like, okay, no, what am I actually feeling?
Yeah. I'm with you. I mean, I just been through a lot with my, corporate job and whatnot. And I was like, listen, I need 3 days
Mhm.
to wallow. I need to be pissed and I need to just like be in a bad mood because I just need to get it out. I need to like get it out and then we can figure out what actually is going on here. I mean, it was going back to like what you were saying earlier, where like when you've done all the things to try to feel safe and you still don't, let that happen. Like,
Mhm.
let that happen because that's going to get you to the point where you can then actually figure out what needs to be
Yeah.
done. So it's like playing with both. You mentioned ego a few minutes ago. So I would also love to hear your thoughts on how like ego is playing into all of this. Cause I think that's also such a huge piece where sometimes like what we think we want versus what we actually want probably aren't the same thing. And all of that's going to come into play. So how are you viewing like ego now in the sense of all of this?
So I want to first start with like, I don't think our egos are a bad thing. Our
Yeah.
egos are what or make us human. They're our identity. It's our sense of drive and of passion and a purpose in the world. And of course, the ego is going to be like, I know what I want and I want to make that life the way I want it. I want to create that life for myself and I want to move it. I think sometimes what can happen is that our ego can become fixated on external validation or an external, like, I want success. Success to me means $2 million.
Yeah.
So I'm now going to focus on the $2 million and it's going to almost create this fissure or this break between our actual self and our actual relationship with ourself of like what actually is success to me versus like what is society painted as success or what do I think I need to do to get success or what do I think I need. And oftentimes ego is working from these very basic needs for us for like love and safety and money and food. And it's very much like the basic human needs. And then it's like, okay, I've now tied that to, you know, if I have 2 million followers on Instagram, I have succeeded, right? Like that is,
Right.
I'm receiving the community, I'm receiving the praise versus like taking a step back and being like, oh, my ego is wanting what? It's wanting love or it's wanting connection or it's wanting like what's underneath the external. And then if it matches and it's like, oh, great, now I can actually work towards the 2 million, whatever it is, the followers, the money, the car, whatever it is. And that just becomes a byproduct versus like the thing that I'm working for. Cause I think
Yeah.
oftentimes like we have these like quarter life, midlife crises because we've decided or our ego has decided like, hey, I want this thing because that's when I'm going to be successful. And that's when I'm going to have checked the box. And then we get there and we realize that's actually not what success was for us after all. And then we're like, I don't know
What now?
anything. What
Yeah.
do I do now?
And then
But
you're
that's
in
not what's like,
distress. Yeah,
yes.
you're in distress with yourself again. You're like, wait, what the hell just happened? I mean, I feel like I have like a midday crisis, early afternoon crisis. I'm like
Like
always
5 times a day.
yeah,
It's
whatever.
weird.
But I think it's a really important piece to what you do because so many times people find themselves in, okay, why aren't I actually happy when I got there? Like
Mhm.
you've arrived and you should feel this sense of like success and elation. And you're like, well, I don't really feel any better. I don't really
Mhm.
feel like that did anything. And so it's a really important piece. And I'm glad that you addressed it. It's not a bad thing. I mean, we are who we are. We should also lean into that. We're individual people. Everyone's going to have a different journey. But I like that you pull that into the approach as well, just to make sure we're keeping things in check, just,
100%. And like, to be clear, we are humans. Like
yeah,
we're not going to, and I feel very strongly about this when it comes to spiritual space, like this idea of ascension is like, I don't always think super helpful. Like, yes, we're meant to expand and to learn and to grow, but we're not meant to like leave the human body. Like that happens when we die. Like we'll
yeah,
be unembodied. And like, I personally am really enjoying this ride
yeah,
most of the time
yeah.
on
Most
the world
days.
most of the time. And for the times that I'm not enjoying, I'm like, oh, interesting. How can I reframe this? What am I learning? How can I be present? Like this is, I read somewhere and I really liked this. And I agree with it that like we chose to, and I believe we choose to reincarnate for this experience. And there's something about
Mhm.
feeling and that feeling the really, really heavy emotions creates a contrast for us to feel the really, really good emotions too.
Yes, like you won't know joy without the opposite of
Exactly.
joy or whatever
Mhm.
that is, and I think my mom's a teacher and she was actually doing this prompt with her students of like, would you rather like never know sadness
Mhm.
or would you ever choose to live in a world but you never knew sadness? And the majority of them said no. because they're like,
Really?
we wouldn't know. Yes. She teaches ESL too, which is like an interesting layer on it as well, because she has people from all different
Wow.
cultures and walks of life and like different spiritual realms and whatever. She was like, it's fascinating because I would say 95% of them said no, because they would never know what like elation is or what joy
Mm.
is or what good is, or to be quite honest, like what you do or don't like.
Yes.
Like if you lived in a world where it was just joy, 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 like what you're just supposed to be obsessed with everything. Like there's reasons we do and don't like things. Like,
Well, it allows us to make a choice of like, is
yeah,
something have to experience something we don't like to be able to realize what we do like. And I think this is a whole different conversation, but like part of the world we live in right now feels so polarized and black
yep,
and white. And so much about what we're meant to do as humans is to understand the gray area of like knowing that there isn't really like, sure, there are universal principles of like, do not kill people, do not
yeah,
be like, right. Do not commit crime. Like there are like these universal, like, don't do this human like rules. But underneath that, this idea of right and wrong, like there is no right and wrong on a universal level. Like I do not believe personally that there is this like judgment of like our identity that's coming up. I think this is more of like, how can I actually flip it and connect into what is my definition of right and wrong?
yeah,
What does right and wrong feel like for me so that I can actually be choosing to do something rather than being told to do something and
mhm,
creating this internal relationship with like, oh, what is right for me? And maybe what is right for me is not what I thought was right for me. Maybe it's not, working a corporate job. Maybe it's quitting my job and moving, or maybe it is working a corporate. I have a couple friends who went full time as entrepreneurs and realized that that wasn't aligned for them and that wasn't right for them. And they went back and got corporate jobs. So it's like, I think sometimes on social media, there can feel like there's this like, this is what happiness looks like, or this is what you need to do to get what you want versus like what actually works for me.
your need to the need to pick. I see it a lot, and I talk about this a lot with in terms of parenting,
Mhm.
um, because like so many people want like, okay, give me these steps, and I'm like, yeah, but like what I value might not be what you
Mhm.
value. Like the way that we're going to approach the situation is going to be really, really different, and one's not better than the other. The
Mhm.
only way it would be like wrong for you is if it feels wrong for you. Like if you're not
100%.
picking the thing that doesn't feel right for you, like listen to what that feels like for you. Like if you feel like you're aligned to this choice, like you should be good to go. But if something's like telling you otherwise, look at that. And it's okay if it's like, well, you didn't do that. Like, okay, but that's because I didn't do that, not because you have to not do that. Um, so the world, I mean, the world we live in is not black and white. I feel like the only thing that is black and white is literally the colors. There is a color black and a color white. Like that's the
Which is
only thing.
funny though, because black is the like absence of all color and white is
Yes.
the combination of all color. So like it really isn't even like this like yes, they're black and white, but they're
Yes.
also like on the two sides of the spectrum. And we as humans love to live in life. We love to experience. We love to look out and and I'm like the biggest feeler emotional person, but I'm like, I want to feel everything. Like I want to look at a rainbow and be moved. I want to like living in Colorado and seeing the sunsets every night. And I sit there and I'm like, wow, I really get to live here. I
Yeah.
really live in the place that I love. And I remember saying to a friend a couple weeks ago, I was like, can you be in love with a place? Because I think
Yes.
I'm literally in love with Colorado. Like everything about it, I love.
I love
Even
that.
the traffic that sucks.
We have
I
lost
love
like
it.
so many friends to Colorado. Like so many of them have moved there, and I completely understand why, because it's stunning. I think you can be in love with the place because like there are places in this world I feel like my soul is at peace. Like that is that alignment. And I also lived in New York City for a few years too. And it was just like that made me my anxiety was like no matter what. I was so dirty and so tired and just like so anxious all the time.
A lot of humans. I'll say that for
Yeah.
someone who is highly sensitive as I am, like going to work and having touched like 90 other human bodies because I had to walk on the subway. Or
Subway.
I
Yeah.
was like, I got to work and I was like, I've been socialized out. Like my all of the bandwidth for humaning. It's 9:30 in the morning and I'm done.
And I need a shower and I need to
Right.
like not talk to anyone. No, I totally are you a Cancer?
I am a Leo, but I have a Pisces moon and a Pisces
Oh,
rising. So I have a lot of
okay.
like water and like
Yeah.
spiritual ethereal energy. And
Yes. That
yeah.
that track. I'm a Cancer with a Leo rising and a Leo moon,
Yay.
which is like, ooh, my
I love that though. That's a lot of like Leo, like identity, like be
Yeah.
seen. Like that's beautiful. Also,
But
I
I cry all the time. I'm a bad bitch that cries a lot. Like that's how I go. Like no in between. But I think it all comes into play. I absolutely adore how you're approaching all of this. If you want to also tell people how you're working with clients, where they can find you, I will also make sure to link everything up in the show notes as well, just for easy access. But if you want to shout out services and where people can find you, that would be awesome.
So I create these personalized containers for clients and their personal transformation, specifically to move through life's great transitions. It's called the Cocoon. It's a 3-month intuitive transformation program. It's part of what I've been talking about today, and you can find that on my website. And we can hop on a call to talk about what that might look like for you and how we could craft something that would, meet you where you're at and help you get to where you want to go. And that's my website, which is ashleybjones.com. And my Instagram is Ashley B. Jones, ashley.b.jones. So you can always DM me there and we can chat there too. But I would love to connect with anyone who is interested in, navigating life or moving through transformation or, working through a big transition in their life and wanting to cultivate this sense of identity and the sense of deeper interconnection with themselves. So that's where you can find me.
Fantastic. And I'll make sure, yes, to go stalk her. She has a great Instagram too. I will make sure to tag everything up in the show notes as well. Ashley B. Jones. This has been, I love
it.
Ashley B. Jones. This has been fantastic to get to chat and connect. Please go follow all things Ashley and let her know if you're interested. The Cocoon. I also just want to get into a cocoon. So that's a fantastic name for it. Ashley, you are a treasure. Thank you so much for spending some time for us. We'll talk soon.
Such a blessing. Thank you so much, Sarah. Seriously.
Thank you for tuning in to the Welcome to My 10 podcast. I hope you had as much fun listening as I do recording. I am so happy to have you here and see you next episode.